All rise. Madison Circuit Court, Division 2, now in session. The Honorable Joe Castle presiding.
Thank you. Please be seated. 21 CI 240. Is the Commonwealth prepared to go forward?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, the jury has already been seated. Are there some preliminary matters we need to address before we begin with the statements?
Yes, Your Honor. May we make appearances?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Katie Tolliver, and I, along with my co-counsel, Kenna Kim.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Lizzie Tolliver. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Represent the Commonwealth of Kentucky in today's case. Our witnesses will now introduce themselves in the order that they will be called.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kylie Kirtle, and today I will be portraying the role of Miss Kennedy Leo.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Sophia Hahn, and I'll be portraying the role of Lori Butler.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm Chelsea Gotchbula, and today I'll be portraying the role of Officer Cody Grant.
Your Honor, would you like us to proceed into pretrial matters, or would you like
Yes.
to dispense?
You will?
Yes, Your Honor. First, we'd like to draw the court's attention to Stipulation 1, which states that all exhibits are authentic and accurate in all respects in today's trial.
Okay.
Next, we'd like to draw attention to case law Doherty versus Commonwealth that states that questions, orders, and threats are not hearsay, as they are not declarations of fact, and therefore are not capable of being true or false. Finally, we'd like to draw the court's attention to one of our attorneys, Lucy Tolliver, who has an autonomic disorder that causes her body to have a difficult time regulating temperature and circulation. So throughout today's trial, she may need to sit down from her roles or take off her clothes. Now, since this is our first time appearing in court, we'd like to ask your preferences on a few matters. First, do we have the freedom to move about below?
Absolutely, yes. Now, when you approach the witness, of course, you should ask permission to approach the witness, but otherwise, certainly move around forward.
Yes, Your Honor. Next, when an objection is sustained, would you like us to move to strike, or should it be assumed that it has been stricken?
You can assume that I should say strike that answer, but if I don't, it is stricken.
Yes, Your Honor. Finally, where would you like us to direct our opening and closing statements? Would you like us to direct it to the attorney or to the jury?
Yes, please.
And with that, Your Honor, the Commonwealth is ready to proceed.
Thank you. And the defense?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. The defense has one pretrial matter today, but can we do introductions before that?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Ollie Fagenbush. I'll be handling pretrial matters for the defense today. Alongside me are my co-counsel.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Brooks Finney, and today I will be delivering the opening statement.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Shayna Garrett, and I will be delivering the closing argument in today's case.
Now, our witnesses will introduce themselves in the order in which they will be called.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Caleb Kenoy, and today I am the eyewitness, Sarge Scott.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Bryce Strauss, but today I am the defendant's roommate, Hayden Russell.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Maddie Brother, and today I am the defendant, Blake Hart.
Collectively, we represent the defendant, Blake Hart. The defense only has one pretrial matter, and that is to draw mock trial, Kentucky High School mock trial Rule 4.9 to the court's attention, which is the rule of sequestration of witnesses. There is no sequestering of witnesses, and therefore it is assumed that all witnesses who testified today were in the courtroom at the testimony proceeding there. And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Thank you. And would the Commonwealth like to proceed with their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. It's just before noon on March 14th, and Miss Kennedy Leon is standing by the bathrooms in the park. Just 30 minutes before, she received a text message from a person named Badger arranging to purchase an ounce of marijuana. Now, Badger was a person Miss Leon knew well. Badger was a person she knew she had dealt with before. Badger was the code name assigned to Blake Hart. Now, Blake Hart wasn't just there to buy marijuana that day. No, she had a plan. Just 2 weeks before, she had yelled at Miss Leone, accusing her of not giving her the amount of marijuana she was owed. Blake Hart, irate, gave an ominous warning. Bad things happen to shady dealers. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she hatched a plan to take it herself. Now, as the clock strikes 12 on March 14th, Blake Hart walks up to Miss Leone. But as Miss Leone moves to take out the marijuana, Blake Hart pulls out a gun. She points the gun at Mrs. Leone's head, demands the money and the $500 in her pocket. Miss Leone stands shaking and terrified. She doesn't dare to move till the police arrive. Meanwhile, Blake Hart walks away with the marijuana she wanted and an extra $500 for her time. Now, as the Commonwealth, in today's case, we hold the burden of proof. We've proved to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Blake Hart committed armed robbery. And to do this, we must prove two things to you. One, that Blake Hart stole property from Miss Leone, and two, when doing so, she threatened her with a handgun. We are confident we meet the burden by the end of today's trial, and to do so, we will call 3 witnesses. First, we will call Miss Kennedy Leone herself, and she'll tell you how just 2 weeks before the robbery, Blake Hart had yelled at her, accusing her of not giving her the marijuana she was owed, and threatened her. Next, she'll tell you on March 14th, she received a text from a private number using the code name Badger, the code name assigned to Blake Hart, arranging to purchase an ounce of marijuana. Finally, she'll tell you that Blake Hart walked up to her, pulled out a gun, pointed it at her head, and demanded the money and the $500. Next, we'll call Miss Rory Butler, and she will tell you that she saw a hooded figure approach Miss Leone. And then after the transaction occurred, she saw Miss Leone stand shaking and terrified by the bathroom. She also saw the hooded figure had a distinctive hole in the abdomen area of their clothes. And finally, we will call Officer Dakota Grant, the responding officer to the scene of the crime. She will tell you that she obtained a search warrant for Miss Hart's home, and she'll tell you that she found everything that would indicate a robbery had occurred. She found an ounce of marijuana, $500 in wrapped bills, a hoodie with a distinctive hole in it, and a Glock 19 handgun. Members of the jury, the evidence will become clear. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. That's why at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Ms. Catherine Tolliver, will come before you and ask that you find Blake Hart guilty of armed robbery in the first degree. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Farrell or Tolliver?
Tolliver.
Thank you, Ms. Tolliver. And for the Commonwealth?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury, there was not enough time. Now, Blake Hart did not commit this robbery. And to be frank with all of you, there's no way she could have. And that is for one simple reason. There was not enough time. Today, we will put forth a timeline defense, showing you, the members of the jury, that there was not enough time for Blake Hart to leave her home, go to LaRue Park, and commit this crime. And because of this fact, the robber in LaRue Park must have been somebody else. It's simple. In fact, the Commonwealth's lead investigator measured the time it takes to walk from Blake's apartment to the scene of the crime. And you will hear that on a busy day with traffic in the streets, it takes more than 30 minutes. I want you to keep that in mind. More than 30 minutes. One of the first pieces of evidence you will see today are text messages between the victim and the robber. The victim texts, "Let's meet at the restrooms in LaRue Park," to which the robber responds, "Great, I live near." Now those text messages were sent at 11:30 a.m., which means the earliest the defendant could have reached the park is 12. And yet the robber arrived at 11:57, in just 27 minutes. what does this time discrepancy mean? Well, it means that Blake Hart could not have been the robber under the best of circumstances. And we will call 3 witnesses today to help prove this. First, you will hear from the eyewitness, Sawyer Scott. Now, Mr. Scott was walking through the town and around the park and will tell you just how busy things were, making Blake's potential trip to LaRue Park much longer than 30 minutes. Next, you'll hear from the defendant's roommate, Hayden Russell. Mr. Russell will tell you that at the time of the robbery, Blake was with him in their apartment, and that there's no way Blake had enough time to leave, go to the park, and commit this robbery. And finally, you'll get the opportunity to hear from the defendant herself. Blake Hart will tell you that on the time, on the day, and on the exact hour of the robbery, she was at home. There was not enough time. Let's review the evidence. From text message to robbery, it took less than 30 minutes. And yet from Blake's apartment to the scene of the robbery, it takes more than 30 minutes. The math does not add up for the prosecution. The robber must have been somebody else. And other evidence will show this as well. In fact, one of the first people you will hear from today is an eyewitness for the prosecution, who was standing just a few feet away from where the robber was located. And she will tell you she believes the robber was wearing a cream-colored hoodie. Later on in the trial, you'll all actually get the opportunity to see the hoodie that was found in the defendant's apartment. And members of the jury, it isn't cream color. In fact, it's dark red, almost the complete opposite color as the description given by the eyewitness. You'll also hear how the drug dealer, Kennedy Leon, assigned animal code names to her buyers, and that Badger, the name of the person who approached Kennedy in the park, was assigned to Blake. But it's important to know, members of the jury, that Blake was not the only Badger. In fact, there were nearly a dozen other people calling themselves Badger, and there's no way for the prosecution to prove which one was in the park that day. Now, despite all of this evidence, the prosecution has the burden of proof in today's case, which means they have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that my client is guilty of this crime. But at the conclusion of all the evidence, you will see many areas of doubt. And it starts with the simple fact that there wasn't even enough time for Blake to get to the park in the first place. The robber must have been somebody else. Now, the prosecution came up here and made it seem that Blake didn't get what she wanted, and so she took it. But members of the jury, it is the Commonwealth who did not get the evidence they wanted, and because of that, they have presented to you a rushed investigation filled with faulty evidence, contradictory testimony, and countless instances of reasonable doubt. And because of all that, we ask that you find the defendant not guilty of robbery in the first degree. Thank you.
Commonwealth wish to call the first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Commonwealth calls Kennedy Leon.
Leon, you've already been sworn. If you have a seat, please. And this Ms. Tolliver?
Yes.
You may question the witness.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kennedy Leon.
And could you tell us a bit about yourself?
There's really not much to know, really. I was born here in Scarborough, and I live with my sister McKenna on the street.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I took a job at Chili's. Our sizzling shrimp fajitas are fantastic. The pay, it really isn't, so I had to pick up some odd jobs here and there in order to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table.
And what odd jobs did you pick up?
I used to sell meat. I'm not proud of it, but at the time, that's how I used to make my living. Thankfully, with the new Panera opening up, I've been able to take a seat for a while.
Ms. Leon, I'd like to talk to you about how you made your sales. Who were your clients?
Well, I did most of my sales at college parties, where the green can really get you some green, you know what I mean, but, I also my regulars, like platypus, elk, and even badger.
Ma'am, you sold marijuana to animals?
No. So sorry for the confusion. No. Those are the animal code names that I used to give to my regular customers. You know, I love animals, so I always did this thing where I would give them the name of whichever animal they reminded me of. I thought they were kind of cute, you know. I even called them my little ganja groupies.
And who were these ganja groupies?
Well, let's see here. There was a hamster, a rabbit, a bunny, which is kind of the same thing, and we even had a badger.
And who was Badger?
It used to be this guy named Ron Jefferson. You know, he kind of annoyed me on how many questions he would always have for me, but sadly, Ronnie passed away in a car accident in May of 2020, and the name was then passed down.
And who was the name passed down to?
Blake Hart. You know, 2 or 3 other people tried to contact me in order to go by that name as well, but I wouldn't let them. Only Blake could contact me using the name Badger, and since she always used a private number, it was pretty easy to tell him it was her.
When was the last time you heard from Badger?
March 14th. I have to admit, I was a bit surprised, you know, given we hadn't exactly what I would call the best of times later last past February.
And what happened in February?
Well, Blake messaged me asking to set up a deal, you know, but when I got there, she just started screaming. She said how money was tight, and she even accused me of ripping her off. And then she threatened me.
And how did she threaten?
She shot this menacing look at me and said that bad things happened to shady dealers. And then she turned around and left me on the road.
Do you know why you're here today?
Yes, I do. The day of March 14th, the last time I heard from Blake, that was all different.
Okay, let's walk through that day. When did you hear from Badger?
Well, at around 11:30, I got a text from a private number. They then identified themselves as Badger, so I then knew it was Blake.
Objection, Your Honor. The testimony that the text messages came from Blake Hart is both speculative and substantially more prejudicial and probative. The Commonwealth's witness is attacking Blake Hart with a lack of foundation to prove that Blake Hart was the one who texted Ms. Leone that day.
Young Mayor Stone.
Yes.
I believe we have sufficient evidence for Ms. Leone to logically conclude that these texts were from Blake Hart, as they used a private number and used the code name Badger, which are the proper procedure in which Ms. Leone contacts her clients.
I think that's a matter you can address on cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
So hold the continue.
Were you finished, Ms. Leone?
Now, as I was saying, at around 11:30, I got a text from Blake, and they identified themselves as Badger, so I was sure it was Blake.
And would you recognize a copy of these text messages if I showed them to you today?
Yes, I did.
Let the record reflect that I'm approaching opposing counsel with a copy of Exhibit 3. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you know.
And Your Honor, would you like to
No, thank you.
Ms. Leone, do you recognize this document?
Yes, these are the text messages that me and Blake sent back and forth on March 14th, and you could say they're why we ended up meeting at work that day.
Is this a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, it appears so.
Your Honor, at this time, the Commonwealth moves to enter Exhibit 3 into evidence pursuant to Stipulation 1. Both parties agree that this document is fair and accurate.
Yeah. Any objection?
Your Honor, the defense has no objection to this document. We plan to use it as well.
So,
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
yes.
Ms. Leone, could you walk us through these messages?
Yes, of course. As you can see here, Blake messaged me asking to buy an ounce of marijuana. I then proposed that we park at the meeting place, and she agreed to meet there.
And what happened next?
Well, I grabbed my stuff and headed out to the park. I got there around 5 minutes before noon.
Ms. Leone, what stuff did you have on you that day?
Well, let's see here. I had my phone, a clear plastic bag of weed, and quite a bit of cash on me. You know, I planned on resupplying my stock later that afternoon, but clearly it didn't get to happen. However, I always did this thing with my cash. You know, I kept $500 in my pocket and $700 in my shoe. I split it up that way in case I ever got robbed. they were not in their place. Unfortunately, we got kind of different.
And what happened when you left the car?
Well, a person approached me. You know, they were wearing this bulky black coat and a dark gray hoodie sweatshirt, all zipped up. You know, I mean, you could hardly see their face, so I called out Blake to make sure that I even had the right reason.
And how did this person respond?
Well, they nodded and
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. Rule 801 very specifically states that nonverbal communication is hearsay, and therefore testimony by the head nod is inadmissible in court today.
I will permit this to
Yes, Your Honor.
You finished, sir?
No, as I was saying, they, to my understanding, confirmed it and then proceeded to walk towards me.
And what happened when you first attended?
Well, at that point, you know, I could kind of tell that something was up. So I just handed over the bag of weed and tried to get this whole transaction over with just as quickly as I could.
And what happened after you handed over the bag?
Well, Blake started digging around in the book. I just thought she was pulling out money, you know, but instead she pulled out a gun. And she pointed it right at me, finger on the trigger.
And what happened after somebody pointed the gun at you?
I was terrified. I mean, Blake demanded that I give her all of the money that I had on me. I handed it over to her as quickly as I could. I had just said my daughter.
And what did you do?
Blake told me to turn around and count to 100. At that point, I was so shaken I could hardly count. I could hardly even breathe. I just stood there hoping and praying that Blake wouldn't shoot me. I didn't even move until after the police arrived.
Thank you, Ms. Lillian. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Ms. Leon, it was your idea to meet Robert in the roof park, correct?
Robert in Lord Park? I'm not sure who Robert is, but I did tell Blake that I just headed out for the Lord Park and it's pretty far from the park.
Excuse me, I meant Robert, but in that case, regardless, you suggested that you mean the roof park to Badger, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did. It's a pretty rundown park, you know. I mean, it's just kind of just some random park that I suggested.
And Badger agreed to meet you there because he or she claimed to live near the roof park. Is that right?
Yes, however, I didn't really question it, you know. I mean, I don't really know where Blake Hart lives, so I just got the confirmation and proceeded to walk towards the Lord Park.
Right, as you just said, you don't know where Blake Hart lives, which means you don't know how long it would take Blake Hart to travel from her residence to the roof park, do you?
Well, I asked them if they could meet up at 12, and they told me yes. So really, I just thought this was a normal drug transaction, you know. I didn't really think anything of it.
But ultimately, that's a yes, that you were unaware of the distance between Blake Hart's residence and the roof park.
I mean, yes, I never thought to question it.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
I'd like to talk about the specific timeline of things that needed to happen in order for Blake Hart to reach you in time. Your Honor, let the record reflect I will be referring to what has been previously entered as Exhibit 3. Now, Ms. Leon, you will agree with me that the last text message here was sent at 11:30 a.m., correct?
Yes, it was.
And you testified that you arrived at the park at 11:55 a.m., didn't you?
Yes, I did arrive about 5 minutes before noon.
And isn't it true that the robber arrived a couple minutes after, 11:57?
I mean, yeah, their punctuality, I guess, wasn't the best that day, but they did get there around 4.
So that means it took both of you less than 30 minutes to reach that point, right?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation. Ms. Leon can't know whether or not the stopping point, or whether they were texting while walking, so she doesn't know the distance or the length of time it would take to get to the park.
She perhaps answered on her own behalf and not on somebody else's.
Yes, Your Honor. So I'll ask you. That means it took both of you less than 30 minutes to reach that point.
Objection, I already raised it.
She may be able to answer if it took her 30 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor.
I don't think she'd be able to answer for someone else.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Now, Ms. Leon, the robber arrived at 11:57, correct?
Yeah, around that time. I mean, I knew that it was around 12.
Which is roughly 27 minutes after the last text message was sent, right?
I mean, doing the math now, I've never been the best at math, I must claim. But, I mean, yeah, that sounds about right.
Right. And when the robber entered the roof park, you saw them walking, didn't you?
At the time they entered the park, yes, they did appear to be walking.
They didn't appear to be running or jogging?
When they entered the park, no, but obviously I was spying on them the entire time. I don't know what they were doing before they got there.
And in the entire time that they were in your eyesight, they never once appeared to be in a hurry, did they?
They were in my field of vision. No, it just seemed like your typical standard drug dealer.
Now I'd like to talk about all the badgers that you've encountered before. Isn't it true that the first badger was the now deceased Ronnie Jefferson?
Yeah, good old Ronnie. You know, I was really upset to hear that I was passing, honestly. I then decided to let Blake Hart get the code name, and that was that.
And Blake Hart got the code name from Ronnie, but Ronnie gave the code name out to more than just Blake Hart, didn't he?
To my knowledge, yes. I did tell Mr. Jefferson to please not do that, however. To my knowledge, I did hear it.
So, and the people that he distributed the name to, many of them contacted him, didn't they?
A couple, one or two maybe. It never even got to the point that of any sort of drug transaction. Blake always followed all of my instructions that I gave out to all of my clients, and it's always very easy to tell this her.
So Blake followed the instructions, but Blake herself even distributed the name to others, didn't she?
To my knowledge, yes, it appears so.
And those others also contacted you, didn't they?
Yes, again, as I said, they did contact me. However, it never even got to the point of any sort of transaction, because I always could tell it was Blake.
Many of them contacted you via text message, correct?
Yes, that's how I got in contact with, all of my clients. There's really nothing out of the ordinary.
Now, Miss Leon, were you aware of the fact that just days before the robbery, Blake Hart distributed the Badger code name to several other individuals at a college party?
Maybe not at the time, no. I couldn't tell you how many days, but I obviously wasn't going to give out the name myself.
And finally, Miss Leon, I'd like to draw your attention to Exhibit 3 once again. If you'll read along in the second text as I read aloud. I thought you didn't want to buy from me anymore. So it was your understanding when you received a text message from Badger that Blake Hart had no intention of dealing with you, correct?
I assumed that. After our confrontation in February, I didn't think she'd want to deal with me anymore, I can't even say I wanted to deal with her either. After the cold threat that she gave me in February, I didn't think she'd be reaching out anytime soon.
But ultimately, that's a yes, that you did not think that Blake Hart wanted to purchase drugs from you anymore?
After February, no.
Thank you, Miss Leon. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect.
No redirect.
Amy, you may step down and be excused.
Thank you.
Your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The Commonwealth calls Roy Butler to the stand.
Butler, you've already been sworn. If you would have a seat in the witness stand. Ms. Kim, you're a witness.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good afternoon, my name is Roy Butler.
What do you do for a living, Ms. Butler?
I'm the park maintenance employee at Drew Park. I've been working there for about 25 years now.
What are your job duties as a park maintenance employee?
Well, it's my job to keep them clean. Most of the time it means cleaning the bathrooms, but it's a part of the job. It's kind of boring, but it pays the bills.
Do you know why you're here today, Ms. Butler?
Yes, I witnessed a robbery on March 14th.
Now, let's walk through that day. Where were you on the morning of March 14th?
Well, I was at the room making the rounds. I had a pretty early morning that morning. A lot of college kids had came in the night before and made a mess of them, so I was recycling discarded beer cans and such. Around noon, I decided that I wanted a cup of coffee, so I headed over to Park Vending Machines.
Now, did you see anything when you got to the vending machine?
Yeah, as I was trying to smooth out my $2 bills, I saw someone standing by the park bathrooms. I didn't know who it was at the time.
And who was this individual?
Well, I didn't recognize them in that moment. I knew the face. It was someone I had seen selling drugs in the room before, but I now know them as Miss Leon.
And what was Miss Leon doing?
She was kind of standing near the front bathrooms texting. I thought something was up, so that's when I decided to hide behind the vending machines. Keep an eye.
And when you hid behind the vending machines, did you happen to see anything?
Yeah, shortly after I hid behind the vending machines, I saw someone come up to Miss Leon. Miss Leon called out Badger, like she was asking her name. It kind of sounded funny to me, but that person got a guess in response.
And what happened as Badger approached Miss Leon?
Well, Miss Leon, pulled out a bag of what I assumed was marijuana. So at that point, I called the police. Right around that time, I saw a friend of mine, Sawyer Scott, walking through the park.
And what did Sawyer Scott do?
Well, it was strange. Usually Sawyer is being healthy and running through the park, but that day he wasn't. He was kind of slowly walking. He glanced over for a moment and kind of shrugged his shoulders and went on his way.
And could you clarify for the members of the jury what Badger was wearing that day?
Yes, Badger was wearing a big, bulky black coat and a hoodie all cinched up. And the hoodie was all messed up too.
Why do you say the hoodie was all messed up?
Well, it had a very large, noticeable hole in it. I don't know why anyone would wear anything like that out.
Now, I'd like to clarify a few things for the members of the jury. Did you ever see the hooded individual pay Miss Leon for whatever was in that clear plastic bag?
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation. Opposing counsel is asking Ms. Butler to give testimony from a hindered position of hiding behind the vending machine, and that would be purely speculation.
Well, let's have her answer, and if she does say yes, then she won't be able to explain it. But the question itself was simply whether she saw it, and I'm going to allow that.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, where do you finish, Ms. Butler?
Oh, so, no, I didn't see the Badger person pay Miss Leon the marijuana, no.
And did you ever see the Badger person pull out a gun on Miss Leon?
To be honest, if they did pull out a gun, I wouldn't have seen. The way that the Badger person was standing, their hands were facing away from me, so I wasn't able to see if there was a gun.
And what did Miss Leon do at that point?
Well, Miss Leon handed over the bag of marijuana, and right around that time after that, they split ways. The Badger person walked right next to me and scared the bejesus out of me. Thankfully, they didn't see me though.
And did you speak to the police that day, Ms. Butler?
Yes, I did. After the police arrived, shortly after I called them, and I told them about the Badger person, the drugs transaction, and I led them right to the scene.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thanks so much. Cross?
Mr. Order, may I proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Ms. Butler, I understand you're here today because you just were in the park and have gotten caught up in this whole ordeal, but I do still need to ask you some questions that weren't addressed on your direct examination. Now, the person who met Kennedy in the park that day, you believe that they were wearing a cream-colored hoodie, isn't that right?
I'm not too sure on the color.
But you think it was cream-colored, correct?
When the police asked me the color, I did suggest cream, but like I said, I'm not sure on the color of the hoodie at all.
So that's a yes. You think it's cream-colored.
I think not 100% sure.
Now, just so we're clear, your testimony today is limited to the events that took place inside the Rue Park. Isn't that right?
Yes, it is.
But are you aware that it was a pretty eventful day in the city?
I heard some news of a game.
But you don't have any knowledge about the activity around town or how busy things are?
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance. I don't see how the events around the city is relevant to today's case.
You may be correct, but let's go along a little ways. I always like to see where the question is going.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Butler, I'll ask you again. You don't have any knowledge about the activity around town or how busy things were, do you?
Well, I knew there was a game going on, but I was at the Rue Park very early in the morning.
But what you do know is that when this person in the cream-colored hoodie arrived, they were walking to get there, correct?
Yes, it seemed to be, but again, I'm not too sure of the color of the hoodie.
They weren't sprinting or running, isn't that right?
Not that I noticed, but I can't say for 100% sure.
And you never mentioned that they appeared to be out of breath in any way, isn't that right?
I didn't see them out of breath, but then again, I didn't notice it.
But you would agree with me in saying that it never appeared that this person was in a rush to get somewhere, correct?
Not necessarily, I didn't really notice if they were or were not.
So let's talk about when you called the police. When you called, you reported that you had just witnessed a drug deal. Isn't that correct?
Yes, when I first called the police, I noticed in a bag of marijuana being handed over to an individual, so of course at that time I did think it was a drug deal.
Yet even when the police showed up to investigate, you never once told them that you thought you saw a robbery. Isn't that right?
No, I just told them about the CO, the drugs being handed over, and I tried to help them the best that I could.
But in your defense, you couldn't see everything because this person in the cream-colored hoodie was blocking your views. Isn't that right?
I can see their hands, but I can see...
Objection, Your Honor. This is more prejudicial than probative. The witness, Roy Butler, did not clarify that she was definitive about the color of the hoodie. Therefore, opposing counsel is misleading the jury.
If I may respond, Your Honor, Ms. Butler made it clear that she thinks the hoodie is cream-colored. In action, that's what she even told the lead investigator, Dakota Grant.
Overrule, continue.
I'll ask again, Ms. Butler. You couldn't see everything because this person in the cream-colored hoodie was blocking your view, correct?
They were, I can see their hands.
You're about 30 feet away, isn't that right?
Yes, that sounds about right.
I'm going to walk about 30 feet back into this courtroom. This is about 30 feet, correct?
Yes, I would say so.
Now we're going to say that I am Miss Leone, and I'm going to ask my opposing counsel, Mr. Penny, to come stand in front of me and represent the other person in this cream-colored hoodie. Now the person in the cream-colored hoodie was blocking your view like this, correct?
Yes, they were, so I could not see the hands of the Badger person.
So you can't see anything going on between me and Mr. Penny, right?
I could not see the hands of the Badger person, no.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. Now while this was going on, another eyewitness, Sawyer Scott, walked by. Isn't that right?
Yes. Scott, or Sawyer walked by for a moment, glanced over, and then quickly was on the way.
Your Honor, let the record reflect I will be providing opposing counsel with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4. Would the court like a copy?
No, sir.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Now this is the map that you drew for the investigation, correct?
Yes, it was. You can tell that I'm definitely not an artist.
And it is a fair and accurate copy, isn't it?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves to enter Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Any objection? So,
No objections, Your Honor.
so moved.
May I publish the jury?
You may.
Now, based on this map that you drew, Sawyer Scott had a different angle than you, correct?
Yes, he did.
And Sawyer could have actually seen between these two individuals, couldn't he?
Yes, he could have, but like I said before, he didn't really seem concerned with what was going on. He glanced over maybe once, shrugged, and went on his way.
He didn't seem concerned. He shrugged and went on. And then he walked away, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. It's a compound question.
I'm sorry, it's a what?
A compound question, Your Honor.
If I may respond, Your Honor, I was just restating the witness's statements and then adding a question based upon those.
Yes, that was, continue.
Yes, Your Honor. As I was saying, the witness didn't seem concerned, shrugged, and then walked on, correct?
Yes, he was there for only a brief moment once the two people were together. When before they even parted ways, he had left once.
But Sawyer didn't scream or take off running, did he?
No, I don't know what was up with him that day.
He just walked away, correct?
Yes, he did. He said he glanced over for a brief moment, maybe.
And then this person in the cream-colored hoodie turned and walked past you, isn't that right?
Yes, they did.
They walked past you. They didn't take off sprinting or running, did they?
No, when I glanced back over, they were right past me. They did scare me.
You watched them walk away for about 30 seconds, isn't that right?
Yes, that sounds about right.
And in that 30 seconds, they never took off sprinting or running, did they?
I didn't notice, no.
Ms. Butler, isn't it fair to assume that, based on your experience with drug deals in the park, if someone had committed armed robbery, they'd want to flee the scene as quickly as possible?
I have no idea.
But yet, isn't that one of the reasons you didn't think you saw a robbery in the park that day, correct?
No, I didn't know all the information at the time.
And you were still astounded that you apparently witnessed a robbery, isn't that correct?
Yeah, I was shocked at first, but now hearing all the context of what happened that day, it would make sense that it was a robbery.
But that's a yes. You are astounded that it's apparently a robbery.
When I first heard, yes, I was.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Any regret?
No regret, Your Honor.
Thank you. Now you may step down and be excused. Next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the Commonwealth calls Dakota Grant to the stand.
You're already sworn, so if you would just have a seat and you're right.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Officer Dakota Grant.
And where do you work, Officer Grant?
I work for the Scarborough Police Department, or the SPD. I've been working there for about 6 years now.
What do you do as a police officer?
As an officer, it's my job to review scenes when crimes are called in. I drive around in my squad car until it's time to collect more reports and review more evidence. I also happen to be detective in training. I was assigned by my chief to take on that role in today's case.
And what do you do as a detective?
As a detective, it's my job to follow up on the reports that my fellow officers give me. So I've really seen this case from start to finish. I've also worked on a number of cases as a detective.
All right, Officer Grant, I'd like to talk to you about today's case. Can you explain to the members of the jury why you're here today?
Of course. I was a responding officer and detective in today's case. I responded to a call about a potential drug transaction in Rue Park on March 14th. I also investigated the claim that Miss Young had been robbed at gunpoint.
Now, can you walk us through that day?
Of course. I got my coffee from Duncan and started patrol at around 8 a.m., just like every other day. Normally, I'd have my police pet dog with me, but he was on paternity leave at the time. Around noon, I got a call from Rue Park.
What did you do once you received that call?
I headed right on over. I made contact with the 911 caller, Miss Rory Butler, and Miss Butler then led me to Miss Young, who she identified as one of the two people in the potential drug transaction.
What did you do once Miss Leon was identified?
Well, I tried talking to Miss Young, but she appeared to be acting strangely. She was staying by the park bathrooms and appeared to be nervous. I tried talking to her at that point to calm her down.
What did you tell Miss Leon?
Well, first I followed standard procedure and identified myself as an officer. I then proceeded to ask if she needed any help, but when Miss Young shook me off, I then proceeded to collect her ID.
What did you do once you had collected her ID?
Well, when I found that she had an outstanding warrant for arrest, I placed her under arrest and seized her cell phone.
Now, what happened once you placed Miss Leon under arrest?
Well, as I went to place Miss Young under arrest, she got very emotional, crying, even telling me that I had the wrong person. Miss Young then informed me that she had just been robbed at gunpoint by an individual named Blake Hart.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay. Under relevant case law, Montgomery v. Commonwealth, there is no specific investigative hearsay exception. So just because Ms. Leon's statements were to the lead investigator, that does not make them automatically admissible.
Then may I respond?
Yes.
We're using this for the effect on the listener, an exception to hearsay. We're going to show that the listener, being Officer Grant, show how this statement impacted her approach to her investigation.
I will overrule the objection and admonish the jury that the testimony is not to be taken as fact so much as to explain the actions of the officer in the investigation that she undertook.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Officer Grant, were you finished with your response?
Well, as I said earlier, Miss Young informed me that she had just been robbed at gunpoint. So.
And how did this impact your investigation?
Well, this took our investigation from small level distribution of marijuana to armed robbery, which is something we take very seriously. I then took accounts from Miss Butler and Miss Young and obtained a warrant to search her cell phone.
Now let's talk about that cell phone. What did you do once you received the warrant?
Well, once I went through her phone, I found a series of texts between her and an individual under the name of Badger.
Now, did you ever find out who Badger was?
Well, yes. I went straight back to Miss Young and questioned her about who Badger was, and she informed me that Badger was the alias given to Blake Hart.
Now, would you recognize a copy of these text messages if I showed them to you today?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, let the record reflect I am approaching the witness with Exhibit 3. Now, can you walk us through these text messages, Officer Grant?
Of course. As you can see, these messages indicated that the person that met up with Ms. Leone and possibly robbed her went under the alias of Beckett.
So, what did you ask Miss Leon next?
Well, I asked who the badger was, and she told me it was Blake Hart.
And then, did Miss Leon tell you anything else?
Yes. I then asked Ms. Leone what exactly had been stolen from her, and she informed me that an ounce of marijuana and exactly $500 folded and wrapped in a rubber band had been stolen from her.
Again, Your Honor, an objection to hearsay. I'd like to read again, cite Madeline v. Commonwealth. There is no investigative hearsay exception, and just because these are statements to the officer, they are not automatically admissible, and they cannot be used for their truth value whatsoever.
That is correct, but I'm not going to strike the testimony. I'll just simply admonish the jury that the testimony you heard is not to be taken as fact, but simply as for your understanding of what Officer Grant's investigation, the reason for it, and why she proceeded in how she did.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Officer Grant, were you finished with your response?
Yes, I was.
Now, what evidence were you looking for in Blake Hart's house?
Well, for my accounts from Ms. Butler and Ms. Leone, I have a list of evidence to search for. All I needed to do was go into Blake Hart's apartment and see if their stories matched up.
Well, did their stories match up?
Yes, they did. I found that Blake Hart was in possession of an ounce of marijuana, $500 of various bills that were folded and wrapped in a rubber band, which is exactly as Ms. Young had described. I also found that Blake Hart was in possession of a gray hoodie with a hole in the abdomen area and a black bulky coat, which is just as Ms. Butler had described.
Now, Officer Grant, did you find a weapon in Blake Hart's apartment?
Yes, I did. I found a loaded Glock 19 handgun hidden in Blake Hart's kitchen unit.
And did you take pictures of these items?
Yes, I did. I actually have these photos here today if you'd like to take a look.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I am approaching opposing counsel with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 6, 7, and 8. Your Honor, let the record reflect that I am approaching the witness. Would you like a courtesy copy? Now, Officer Grant, do you recognize these documents?
Yes, these were the pictures of evidence I took.
Do these appear to be a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, at this time, the Commonwealth moves to enter Exhibits 6, 7, and 8 into evidence pursuant to Stipulation 1.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor, the defense plans to use these exhibits as well.
Understood. Okay. So admitted.
Yes, Your Honor. May I publish to the jury?
You may.
Officer Grant, can you walk us through these images?
Yes, I can. Exhibit 6 is the $500 in various bills I found hidden in Blake Hart's nightstand. Exhibit 7 is the gray hoodie with a hole in the abdomen area that I found in Blake Hart's dirty hamper. And Exhibit 8 is the Glock 19 handgun and ounce of marijuana I found in Blake Hart's apartment.
Now, Officer Grant, did you do any further investigation into this evidence?
Yes, I would later try to conduct a fingerprint analysis. I was only able to get one semi-usable fingerprint.
And were you able to connect this fingerprint with anyone?
Unfortunately, no. The system flagged a potential match for Blake Hart's roommate, Hayden Russell, but after further investigation, I found that it was not a match.
So what were you able to conclude about this fingerprint?
Well, our system just spits out the 5 closest fingerprints, regardless of the condition. So a human has to go through and make that final determination, which I did, as I had trained in fingerprint determination, and I found that those fingerprints were not a match.
And did you do any other investigation in your case?
Yes. After seizing the marijuana in Blake Hart's home, I put Hayden Russell and Blake Hart in separate rooms for interviews.
And what did you learn in these interviews?
Not much. Blake Hart informed me that she would be invoking her Fifth Amendment rights, and Hayden started yelling at me.
What did Hayden have to say?
When I was filing marijuana into evidence, Hayden yelled at me, "It's my marijuana."
And what did you do upon hearing this?
Well, of course, I entertained the possibility, but after speaking to Hayden, it soon became clear that that was not the case.
Why do you say that?
Well, Hayden did see me file the marijuana into evidence. It did look like Hayden was trying to cover up the blame.
Now, after conducting interviews, did you collect any other evidence in today's case?
Yes, Hayden informed me that Blake Hart took a walk around the apartment complex from 11:30 to 12:30. When I pressed Hayden about where Blake Hart had been on their walk, they had no answer.
Did Hayden have anything else to say?
Yes, I later asked Hayden about where Blake Hart had gotten the $500 from, and they had no answer for that. Then booked Hayden Russell for harboring marijuana.
Now, what other evidence did you search for during your investigation?
Well, I had all the information I needed. All I had left to do was to go and see if the messages matched on Miss Young's phone matched the ones on Blake Hart's phone. I conveniently learned that Miss Hart's phone had been wiped of all its data minutes before I arrived.
Now, Officer Grant, after collecting all of this data, what did you do?
Well, I arrested Blake Hart for robbery in the first degree. Every single piece of physical and circumstantial evidence led me to the conclusion that Blake Hart was the individual that robbed Miss Young on March 14th.
Thank you, Officer Grant. Your Honor, no further questions.
Ben?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? Officer Grant, I'd like to first talk to you about a measurement that you took. In your investigation, you measured that it took 30 minutes to walk from the defendant's apartment to the scene of the crime, correct?
Yes, approximately that time, but it can change due to several conditions.
And this was a very tight 30 minutes, was it not?
Yes, I guess you could say that.
And in fact, it did not allow a lot of time to wait at crosswalks, did it?
No, it did not.
Moving on, let the record reflect that I will be referring to what has been previously entered in evidence as Exhibit 3. Does the witness still have their copy? If not, I can.
Yes, I do.
Officer Grant, you'd agree with me that this last text message here was sent at 11:30 a.m., wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Now, we heard Kennedy Leone testify that she arrived at the park at 11:55, correct?
Yes, she did testify to that.
And that Badger arrived just a couple minutes after that?
Yes.
Officer Grant, both of the eyewitnesses we've heard from today both testify that Badger arrived at the park by walking, correct?
Yes, that's what I heard.
So not running or jogging, but walking. And in fact, Ms. Butler also testified that as Badger left the park, she walked away, correct?
Yes, but the Badger person could have been running after they left Miss Butler's field of vision.
But Ms. Butler did say that she saw Badger exit the park by walking.
Yes, that is what she said.
Now, talking some more about Ms. Butler, she admitted on the stand that her view was obstructed because the robber had the back turned to her, correct?
Yes, she did say that.
But there was another eyewitness in the park, a different angle, wasn't there?
Yes, I do believe there was.
Let me ask you, Officer Grant, did you ever speak to Sawyer Scott?
No, I didn't.
Did Sawyer Scott try and reach out to you?
Yes, they did, but after collecting all the evidence from Blake Hart's home, it slipped my mind to call Miss Sawyer back. And she was very vague in the message that she did leave me.
Let the record reflect that I will be providing opposing counsel with a copy of Exhibit 10. My first witness. Officer Grant, this is a transcript of the voicemail that Sawyer Scott left for you, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you'd agree with me that it signifies Sawyer Scott's intent to speak with you, doesn't it?
Yes, but as you can see in her message, she is very vague. At the time, I was helping investigate multiple robbery cases, so I wish she had been more specific.
And is this a fair and accurate copy?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, this time the defense moves to introduce this exhibit into
Any
evidence.
objection?
Yes, Your Honor, this document is hearsay.
May I see that? I'm going to allow its admission.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Officer Grant, I want you to direct your attention to the top of the page where it says time of message. This voicemail was left for you on June 28th of last year, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
So it's your testimony that over the span of 8 months, you never found the time to contact a potential robbery eyewitness.
No, her message was very vague and didn't explain any of the information that was related to today's robbery.
And because her message was vague, you didn't try and reach back out to her to figure out what she was talking about?
Well, I collected all the physical evidence that I needed for today's case, so it slipped my mind to contact her back.
But you did not collect all the eyewitness evidence in this case, did you?
No, but I believe I collected all the necessary eyewitness accounts.
So you don't believe that other eyewitness testimony is necessary?
In most cases it is, but
So is that a yes or no to my question?
yes, it is.
It's necessary or is it not?
It is necessary.
So, Officer Grant, just to clarify things for the jury, we are in trial right here, today, and you're testifying on behalf of the Commonwealth, and yet there's still an eyewitness who you haven't spoken to?
Yes, again, her message is very vague, and it slipped my mind to contact her back, and I had enough physical evidence that I do believe that my conviction is over.
Well, let's move on to an eyewitness you did actually talk to. Ms. Butler earlier stated that she believed the robber was wearing a cream-colored hood, correct?
Yes, she did say that. She was not sure on the color.
But she did say she thought it was a cream-colored hoodie?
Yes, that's what she reported.
Let the record reflect that I will be referring to Exhibit 7. Officer Grant, do you have this document on the screen?
Yes, I do.
Yes or no, Officer Grant? Is this a cream-colored hoodie?
No, but it does have a distinctive hole in the abdomen area, just as Ms. Butler had described.
But it's not cream-colored, is it?
No, it isn't.
While we're on the subject of what you found in the defendant's apartment, let the record reflect that I will be referring to what has been previously entered into evidence as Exhibit 8. Do you still have your copy of this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
Now, Officer Grant, you testified in direct examination that the bag here contains 1 ounce of marijuana, correct?
Yes, I do testify.
But just so we're clear, you never measured the amount of marijuana in this bag, did you?
No, I didn't personally measure it, but I do know that this does contain an ounce.
So it's your testimony that you know this bag contains 1 ounce of marijuana,
Yes, it does contain an ounce of marijuana.
but you never measured it, did you?
Not personally, but
Objection, Your Honor. This has been asked and answered.
I think it would be well if the witness, I'm going to allow the questioning. I think he's got a couple more questions on the
Yes, Your Honor.
Officer Grant, I'll ask again. You did not measure the amount of marijuana that was in this bag.
No, not personally, but I do know it contains approximately an ounce of marijuana.
That's right, approximately 1 ounce of marijuana. But all that really means, Officer Grant, is that you're assuming how much marijuana is in that bag, aren't you?
I wouldn't say it was an assumption. I'd say it is approximately an ounce of marijuana.
Approximately, but you don't know for sure?
Not the exact numbers, but I do know it's an ounce.
You just said you didn't know the exact numbers, Officer Grant, so I'd like to get a clear answer. Do you know with 100% certainty whether or not 1 ounce of marijuana is in that bag?
No, but I do know it's an approximately an ounce.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any regret?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Officer Grant, you heard other members of today's trial testify, and is it possible that somebody could have made that 30-minute distance while running, correct?
Yes, I do believe it's possible.
And you know that that bag of marijuana is approximately 1 ounce of marijuana.
Yes, I do know that.
Thank you. Your Honor, no further questions.
Recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Grant, you just testified that you know there was approximately 1 ounce of marijuana in that bag.
Yes, approximately that.
You didn't include that information in your affidavit, though, did you?
No, I didn't.
Thank you. No further questions.
We regret. Is that much more you can ask?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the Commonwealth rests.
The Commonwealth has rest, and so I think we take a 5-minute break.
Yes, Your Honor.
Commonwealth versus Hart. I believe the Commonwealth has rested, and now the defense may call for 6. Are you You want to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense calls Sawyer Scott to stand.
Scott, you're already sworn, so just have a seat. Mr. Garrett? You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please state your name for the record?
My name is Sawyer Scott.
And where do you live, Mr. Scott?
I live right outside the Rue Park at the edge of town.
Now, we are here today concerning events that took place in and around LaRue Park on March 14th of 2021. Were you in or around the park that day?
I was a little bit of both. I was taking a shortcut through the park where I saw Kennedy and another figure.
Now, where were you going on this shortcut through the park?
I was going to a little sandwich shop that I knew of. I forgot to go grocery shopping earlier that week, and Lord knows I couldn't try to go now. Everything was just so slammed.
Can you explain to the jury what you mean by everything being slammed?
Well, everything was just extremely busy. There were no food delivery apps available. Same with pizza delivery. There was a big SEC championship basketball game on TV, and it was around noon on a Sunday. So churches would have just been letting out, and people would have been going to eat.
And what did you see on your shortcut through LaRue Park?
Well, I saw Kennedy Line standing in front of the restrooms when another person in a hoodie approached.
When this person in the hoodie approached, were they running or sprinting to get there?
Not at all. They were just walking.
Did it appear as though they were out of breath from running?
No, it was definitely cold enough to be able to see a breath, and I couldn't even see one.
We heard testimony earlier today from park employee Rory Butler, who was hiding between two vending machines and saw you walk by. Do you know Miss Butler?
Yes, I do. I know her on some of my runs through the park. Kind of had a crush on her at the time. Why not say that?
Mr. Scott, even though you are under oath, I won't ask you any more questions about this crush.
Thank you so much.
We still must discuss Miss Butler. Did you see her in the park that day?
No, I did not. She must have had a pretty good hiding spot. I hope she wasn't hiding from me.
Now, Miss Butler testified that the person who met Kennedy was wearing a cream-colored zip-up hoodie. What is your response to that?
Well, Rory was closer to the scene of the crime than I was, so she says that the hoodie's cream-colored. I have no reason to disagree.
Miss Butler also testified that she reported this to the police as a drug deal and not a robbery. What is your response to that?
I actually agree with that statement. Kennedy handed over some bag of substance to another figure in the park. Seemed like a pretty classic drug deal to me.
Now, when Kennedy handed over this bag, could you see her face at the time?
Yes, I could.
And how did Miss Leone's facial expressions appear to you personally?
She seemed totally and completely normal. No fear or surprise in her face at all. Honestly, she was just dealing like a boss.
Were you able to see if this person in the hoodie was pointing a gun at Kennedy?
Yes, I would have been able to see that, but I didn't even see a gun. It looked more like a cell phone.
Now, we know that Miss Butler called and reported this to the police, but did you?
No, I did not. I minded my own business and went about my way to meet up with my friends and watch the game on TV.
If you did not call the police, then do you know how you ended up here in court today?
Well, I found out months later that police were considering this a robbery case, and I found it extremely odd that no one had ever tried to reach out to me and ask me what I saw. So I tried to contact the police myself.
And who did you try to contact, Mr. Scott?
I tried to contact Officer Dakota Grant while I was in charge of this investigation.
Were you able to speak with Officer Grant?
No, I was never able to. I ended up having to leave a voicemail.
Would you recognize this voicemail?
Of course.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I will be having the witness refer to what has already been entered into evidence as Exhibit 2. Do you still have your copy, Mr. Scott?
Yes, I do.
And is this the voicemail that you sent to Officer Grant?
Yes, it is.
Can you please read this aloud for the jury?
Of course. Hello, this message is for Officer Dakota Grant. My name is Sawyer Scott, and my phone number is 270-555-8491. I need to talk to you about a robbery case you investigated several months back. I apparently saw what happened, and I can tell you it isn't what you think it is. Please call me back. Again, my name is Sawyer Scott, calling about a case you investigated, and I can be reached at 270-555-8491. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Now, you are an eyewitness to today's case. But did you ever get a return call from Officer Grant regarding this voicemail?
No, never even a return message.
Did you get a return call or message from any officer regarding this vital information?
No. Again, I just find it extremely odd that no one ever even tried to reach out to me to ask me what I saw.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Ms. Garrett, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Scott. I'm going to have to ask you a few questions. It is true that you suffer from type 2 diabetes, correct?
Yes, I do.
And when your blood sugar gets low, you can enter a state of what is known as hypoglycemia.
Yes, that can happen.
And you were experiencing symptoms of hypoglycemia on March 14th.
I was beginning to feel them, but they were very, very minor.
Of course, Mr. Scott. Now, I would like to clarify for the members of the jury what your common symptoms of hypoglycemia are. Now, you typically become shaky, correct?
Very little, yes.
And you can become anxious.
Yes, I can.
And you can get bad headaches.
Yes, I can, but most of the time they're very minor.
However, these bad headaches can cause problems with your vision,
Sometimes.
and they can make it difficult to see far away.
If they get bad enough, which they very rarely ever do.
Of course, however, on March 14th, you would agree with me that you were suffering from one of these bad headaches.
I began to feel a headache coming on that day, which is why I went straight to take care of it.
And you consumed 3 glucose tablets, correct?
Yes, I did.
However, you never followed the 15-15 rule that your doctor recommended for you.
That day, with everything just being so busy, it knocked my time off, and I couldn't get to it in time to follow that rule.
Now, despite your bad headaches, I'd like to talk to you about what you saw on March 14th. That day, you saw 2 individuals standing right outside the bathrooms at Hart, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And one of these individuals was Miss Kennedy Leone.
Yes, that is correct.
And the other person was in a hoodie.
Yes, that is correct.
And you couldn't recognize this person.
No, I could not recognize them at that time.
In fact, you could not tell their height.
No, I could tell. I mean, I would obviously be able to tell that they were tall if I compared them to somebody else, but I was not able to tell them exact height. No.
Of course, Mr. Scott. Now, you also couldn't see their face.
No, the hoodie was pulled really tight and covered their whole face.
And you cannot recall the color of this hoodie that the individual was wearing.
No, which is why I agree with Rory. If she saw the color was cream colored, I totally agree.
Of course, Mr. Scott. Now, I'd like to talk to you about how you said that you never saw a gun that day. And I'd like to talk to you about why that might be. That day you saw Miss Leone and the other person a clear plastic bag.
Yes, that is correct.
However, you never saw the hooded figure take Miss Leone for whatever was in that clear plastic bag.
No, I just saw Kennedy reach out with the bag and the other person took the bag, and that it just seemed like a normal drug deal to me.
Of course, Mr. Scott. Now, as soon as that bag was handed over, you quickly left Lone Park.
Yes, I had figured the drug deal was over, so I left.
Because if the person in the hoodie threatened Miss Leone after you left, you wouldn't know.
Oh, well, I heard Rory testify that as soon as I started walking away, the person in the hoodie walked right toward her. So there could have been anything else happen after I left.
I'm not asking you what you thought there could have been after you left, Mr. Scott. I'm simply asking you what could have been and whether you saw that or not. Now, Mr. Scott.
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation. Opposing counsel is in fact asking Mr. Scott to speculate as to what could have been when he wasn't even in the park, and that would be purely speculating.
May I respond?
I'm going to allow her to rephrase the question. because I think it's an important question.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, if the person in the hoodie threatened Miss Leo after you left, would you know?
If that would have happened, I would not know. But again, I heard Rory testify that the person walked right toward her after I left. So that couldn't happen.
And if the person in the hoodie put out a gun on Miss Leo after you left, you wouldn't know.
If that did happen, I wouldn't know. But again, the person left and walked right toward Rory as soon as I walked away. So that, again, could not have happened.
However, if the person in the hoodie robbed Miss Leo after you left, you wouldn't know that either.
Again, it couldn't have been possible.
However, Mr. Scott, I'm not asking you whether you could have thought it could have happened. I'm asking you simply what you thought and saw. Because of this, it is true that anything that happened after that bag was handed over, you wouldn't have seen.
If I was there, if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have been able to see it, no.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. No further questions, Your Honor.
Briefly,
Briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Scott, opposing counsel was asking about your diabetic symptoms, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain to the jury what they were like that day.
Of course. So I did feel some slight hypoglycemic symptoms coming on, and I made sure I did everything I could to make sure they were as minor as possible. And by the time I got to the park, they were almost non-existent.
And based on the testimony that you have heard in court today, did you apparently miss anything when you left the park?
I don't think that could have been possible. As Rory Butler testified, the person in the hoodie walked right toward her as I was leaving the park. So nothing else could have happened that day.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness.
Lee Cross.
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Now, Mr. Scott, it is true that your hypoglycemic symptoms did not go away until you reached the convenience store. Is that correct?
They did not go away completely until I reached the convenience store, but they were very minor the entire day.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
You may step down and you may be excused. Next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense calls Hayden Russell to the stand.
Mr. Russell, you are under oath and just have a seat. And just
Penny, sir.
your witness.
Thank you. Can you please state your name for the record?
My name is Hayden Russell.
And how old are you, Mr. Russell?
I'm 24. Oh, it's 2022. I'm 25. Oh, goodness.
And how do you know the defendant played Hart?
Well, we're cousins, but we also share an apartment together. She's the best roommate I've ever had.
Let's go right to the chase, Mr. Russell. Do you have any knowledge as to whether or not Blake Hart met Kennedy Lyon in LaRue Park on March 14th?
I mean, based on what I've heard today and what I saw, I don't think it could have happened. Not in that time.
And why do you say that?
Well, I mean, Kennedy earlier said the robber got there at like 11:57, and the officer said that it took around 30 minutes to get from the park to my apartment. And that means that Blake would have had to leave our apartment by 11:27, but she didn't.
Let's start there. Where was Blake at 11:27?
Well, she was with me in our apartment on my couch playing video games.
And about what time did you all stop playing video games?
Like 11:30.
Okay, so at 11:30, did Blake immediately get up and leave?
Oh no, she checked her phone for a few minutes.
And after Blake checked her phone, is that when she left?
Wrong again, actually. She went to her room for a while.
At any point when Blake was with you in the apartment, did you see her wearing a bulky black coat?
I didn't see that, no.
Did you ever see her wearing a gray hoodie?
I also didn't see that.
All right, how about a cream colored hoodie?
I don't even think she owns one of those, actually, so I didn't see that either.
Then can you please tell the jury what Blake was wearing that day?
I saw her wear some shorts, and she also had a t-shirt on. It was that soccer club with that girl who got a concussion. Rubicon Soccer Club.
Now, did you ever observe Blake to be out of breath or sweaty, like she'd been running or jogging?
You're still talking about Blake, right? Run or jog? I'd love to see that. I did not see that that day, no.
Did Blake ever appear to you to be anxious or excited, perhaps?
Other than when I absolutely demolished her at that last round of video games, no, she seemed totally normal.
Now, let's move on to when police searched your apartment and found a bag of marijuana. Whose was that?
That was mine. I made a mistake and I bought it at a party.
And are you sure the marijuana in the apartment is yours?
Yes, actually I am.
And why do you say that you're sure?
Well, not only did I go to court for it, I pled guilty to it in court, I served time for it, and I also paid a fine for it. I don't even know why we're still talking about it, actually, because you've got to make up your mind.
What do you mean by that, Mr. Russell? You've got to make up your mind.
Well, I mean, come on, it can't be both my weed and Kennedy Lyons' weed. It just can't be both. It's got to be one or the other.
It's fair enough. Let's take a look at this marijuana. Let the record reflect that I'll be referring to what has been previously entered into evidence as Exhibit 8.
Is it?
Yes. What can you tell us about this photograph?
Well, this picture actually looks like it's a photo off of Zillow. My kitchen actually doesn't look that good. But this is a photo of our kitchen drawer, and there's a bag of marijuana and a gun in it. And that's where those items were stored.
How did you come into possession of this marijuana?
Like I said, I bought it at a party and made a mistake. Really, the bad techno music and all the loud talking didn't help with decision making either. I really didn't know what I was doing and thought an ounce was a small amount. I ended up with that huge bag.
And the firearm, how did you come to own that?
My parents actually urged me to get it because of the neighborhood we live in. It's not the best.
And can you please tell the jury a little bit about where these items are stored in this photo?
Yes, like I said, this is the kitchen drawer where they're stored, but it's really loud. It's like a poor man's alarm.
You say this is like a poor man's alarm, Mr. Russell. So let me ask you, to the best of your knowledge, did you hear this drawer on March 14th?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Ms. Russell.
Good afternoon, Ms. Holland.
I'm going to ask you a few questions today. Now, first, I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with Blake Hart. Now,
Yes.
you and Blake are close,
We're cousins, yes.
and you guys have been close for a while,
Yes.
and you even live together,
Yeah, like I say, we're roommates.
and you watched Miss Hart when she was at school, correct?
I kind of looked after her a little bit, yeah.
And now you're testifying on Mrs. Hart's behalf today?
Yes, because I don't think she had enough time to even commit the robbery.
Of course. Now let's talk about Blake's relationship with marijuana. You're aware that Miss Hart smoked,
She used to, before that falling out with Kennedy.
but you can't know for certain that she stopped.
Not for certain, but I was helping her submit some job applications to like Bath and Body Works and stuff like that, trying to get her back on her feet because she seemed pretty
Of course,
dedicated.
Mr. Russell. Now, Miss Hart had smoked for a long time, hadn't she?
She had smoked for a while. She got in the wrong crowd in high school.
And you're claiming that right before March 14th, she suddenly decided to stop smoking after years of smoking?
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation. This witness already admitted that they don't know for sure when exactly or if Blake Hart stopped smoking marijuana. Therefore, this question is asking for them to speculate as to the exact date she stopped smoking.
You live with, you don't have to. I'm going to overrule the objection. Continue.
You claim that Blake Hart stopped smoking right before March 14th.
To the best of my knowledge, she did. I mean, she seemed pretty dedicated to it.
Now let's talk about your relationship with marijuana. Now, all throughout high school, you didn't touch drugs.
No, I kept my distance, actually. I dabbled in a little bit of alcohol, you know, typical high school party stuff, but I tried to stay my distance from drugs.
And you didn't use them, correct?
I didn't use them until I went to a party with Blake. I smoked a little bit and then ended up buying what I thought was a small amount.
Mr. Russell, that's right. After a long time of you claiming to not use drugs, you suddenly decided right before March 14th.
Like I said, it was a rush of judgment, it was a mistake, but yes, I did.
Now, Mr. Russell, you can't even give us the name of the dealer?
No, the strobe lights and the techno music, really, I could not see or hear her name.
Of course. Now let's talk about March 14th. Around 11:30, Blake Hart got on their phone.
At 11:30, when we stopped playing video games, she got on her phone, and I assumed she checked some emails just because we were submitting so many job applications.
Mr. Russell, you assume that she was also checking text messaging, texting someone, correct?
I assumed she was checking emails. I don't know exactly what she was doing.
Mr. Russell, you believe she was texting someone?
No.
Mr. Russell, you have no idea what she was doing on her phone, do you?
I have no idea what she was doing on her phone, but like I say, I made an assumption that she was checking emails because of the job applications.
Now after this, you went to the bathroom,
I did.
and when you came back, Blake was gone.
She had left the apartment by that point, yes.
And Blake had been gone for around 40 minutes before she came back.
About.
And you have no idea where she went in that time.
No, but it's not out of the ordinary for her to go take a walk around the apartment complex, actually.
And you have no idea what pace she could be going on a walk.
I wasn't with her, no.
Now, when she came back, she came into the kitchen, correct?
She went into the kitchen, and I assumed she got a glass of water.
But you don't know what she was doing in the kitchen?
I don't know exactly what she was doing in the kitchen, but I'm just telling you what I thought she did.
Now, in the kitchen, you keep a gun in a drawer, correct?
Yes, like I said, it's this kitchen drawer. It's really loud.
And you simply believe she was getting a glass of water?
Yeah, I heard it squeak like it was awesome.
But you didn't see her come back with a glass of water, did you?
No, I figured she finished it in the kitchen and put the glass in the sink.
So, Mr. Russell, you have no idea where Miss Hart went that day?
No, I wasn't with her. I'm not her parent. I don't try to, I try to look after her a little bit because, we're
So,
cousins.
Mr. Russell, let's be clear. You cannot know for certain whether or not Miss Hart had taken the gun that day.
Like I was going to say, I didn't hear the drawer actually that morning when she left.
But you cannot be 100% certain that she did not access the door.
I didn't hear it.
But she has access to it, correct?
It's in a common area of the house.
So she did have access to it till the day of March 14th?
She had access to it, but I never heard the drawer open.
Thank you. No further questions.
Redirect.
Very briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Russell, you were just being asked on cross-examination about a walk that Miss Hart took around 11:30. Now, let me ask you, is it uncommon for Blake Hart to take walks around your all's apartment complex?
No, like I've said many times actually, it's not uncommon for her to take walks around the apartment complex at all.
And is it uncommon for her to be gone for long stretches of time?
No, it's not.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Recross.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, please. So you did receive a text message that day? Sorry, Ms. Hart received a text message that day?
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of my redirect.
That's correct. It is. That's not correct. So, yes, sustain the objection. I guess that's it. You can step down. Excuse me. Next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Blake Hart to the stand.
Ms. Hart, you're already under oath, so just have a seat. Your witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Can you state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Blake Hart.
And how old are you, Blake?
I'm 22 years old.
Let's get right to it. Did you rob the Kennedy line?
No, absolutely not.
Where were you at the time of the robbery?
I was at my apartment complex. It was too far away to get there. There wouldn't have been enough time.
Now,
Objection, Your Honor. This is out the scope of her understanding. Your Honor, please.
You mean it's speculation? Is that what it is?
Yes, Your Honor.
What was the question again?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness stated that there wasn't enough time for her to commit the robbery. I was asking her to elaborate upon that answer.
I'll go ahead and allow her to explain that.
Yes, Your Honor.
In that case, Ms. Hart, was there enough time for you to commit that robbery?
Well, no.
Officer Grant testified here today that it takes a tight 30 minutes to walk from my apartment to the park. So if the robber arrived at 11:57, then I would have had to leave my apartment at 11:27. But I couldn't have.
Why couldn't you have?
Well, at 11:30, I was still playing video games with my cousin, and then I decided to check my emails for a couple minutes.
Okay, so you spent a couple minutes checking your emails. That's 11:32. Did you do anything else after that?
Yes, it was cold outside, so I went to my bedroom to change clothes, and that takes some time.
So how does that impact the timeline?
Well, if it takes a couple minutes to change clothes, that puts me still inside my apartment at 11:34.
Which means what, Ms. Hart?
That means I would only have 23 minutes to make the 30-minute trip to the park.
Now, I'd like to talk for a moment about that person who sent the text messages to Kennedy Line that are pictured in Exhibit 3. To the best of your knowledge, are you the only badger?
Oh, there were so many others.
And could you please tell the jury about the first badger that you're aware of?
The original badger was this guy named Ronnie.
And are you aware of Ronnie distributing the name to anybody?
Well, Kennedy testified here today that Ronnie gave the code name out to a couple other people.
Okay, so far we have you, Ronnie, and a couple people that Ronnie was at. Are you aware of anyone else?
Yes, once again, Kennedy testified that a couple other people contacted her with the badger code name.
And did you give it out to anyone?
Yes, there were some college kids at a party a few days before March 14th, and I gave the code name out to. I don't remember how many, but there was at least 2.
So that's you, Ronnie, the few that you distributed, the few that Ronnie distributed, and the college kids. Blake, I'm out of fingers counting how many badgers there were.
That's what I'm saying. The badger code name was being passed around like candy.
Now, Blake, for just a moment, I'd like to talk to you about what police found in your apartment. They found a large plastic bag of marijuana. Do you have an explanation for this?
Yes, that's Hayden's.
And how do you know that it's Hayden's?
Well, because he was charged for it, pled guilty to it, and went to jail for it.
What about the $500 that police officers found in your apartment?
This is my emergency fund. I have saved that.
Were you present in the courtroom when the eyewitness, Rory Butler, described what the robber was wearing?
Yes, I was here, and the Rory person, she testified that the robber was wearing a cream colored hoodie.
Your Honor, let the record reflect I will be referring to what has been previously entered as Exhibit 7. Now, Blake, this is the hoodie that was found in your apartment. How does it differ from that description?
Well, this hoodie is not cream. In fact, it's dark gray, really almost black. And not only is that a different color, but it's the complete opposite color, really. The prosecution is contradicting their only eyewitness.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Hart, I'd first like to start by talking about your relationship with Miss Leone. Now, Miss Leone was your drug dealer,
Yes, for a couple months.
and she's been your drug dealer for a while now.
For a couple months, yes.
But that'll change towards the end of February, isn't that right?
That's right. That's when I decided to stop doing drugs.
That's right, because you began suspecting that Miss Leone was ripping you off, isn't that right?
That's correct, yes.
And this made you angry, didn't it?
I wouldn't say angry, I was upset, but I never, went up to her. We were having a conversation and it came up.
Well, Miss Hart, you were so upset that you went up to Miss Leone and you accused her, didn't you?
Well, no, I never went up to her. We were already having a conversation and the topic came up.
That's right, let's talk about this conversation. You went up to Miss Leone and you told her that she was overcharging you, right?
I confronted her about this in this conversation we were already having, yes.
Well, in this conversation, you yelled at her, didn't you?
By the end of it, we were both yelling, so.
And then you threatened her?
I never threatened her, no.
Well, Miss Hart, you were so upset that she was ripping you off that you told her bad things happen to shady dealers. Isn't that right?
I did say that, but you're taking it out of context, really. That was me looking out for her when you're being a shady dealer, if something could happen to you, and I would never want anything bad to happen.
Of course, Ms. Hart. Now, let's discuss how you typically get in contact with Ms. Leone. Now, to get in contact with her, you would send her a text message?
Yes, we had a system set up.
That's right, and you use a private number.
Yes, we used a private number, and I had the animal code name Badger at that point.
That's right, you used the animal code name Badger to communicate with Miss Leone for months. Isn't that right?
For the couple months that she was my dealer, yes.
Now, it's your claim that you never contacted Miss Leone after your confrontation.
That's true, yes.
But is there any way that we can verify that, Ms. Hart?
Well, through my text messages, maybe not, but through Kennedy's you can.
Well, Ms. Hart, because you conveniently wiped your phone of all data on the day of the robbery, we can verify that, correct?
Once again, not through my text messages, but Kennedy will also have those.
Well, we did look at Kennedy Leone's text messages today, and there was nothing for us to compare them to because you wiped your phone, correct?
I did wipe my phone, yes.
Now let's talk about some of the things that Officer Grant found in your apartment. You heard her testify that she found a hoodie with a distinctive hole in the abdomen area. Isn't that right?
I did, the gray hoodie, almost dark gray.
Yeah. Now, you maintain that you didn't wear this hoodie on your walk, right?
I didn't, it was in my dirty handbook.
But you didn't provide the police with clothes that you apparently were wearing on your walk, did you?
I did not, no.
Now, you also heard that Officer Grant found exactly $500 in your bedside drawer.
Like I said, that's my emergency fund, yes.
That's right, you maintain that you didn't steal this money from Miss Leone.
I did not know I already had this money in my emergency fund.
In fact, you got this by selling items, correct?
That's true, yes.
But you can't tell us what items you sold, can you?
Well, I could name a few, sure.
But you can't give us a list, did you?
I mean, they were just normal items.
And you can't tell us who you sold these items to?
I wouldn't want to say who I sold those items to. It was a private thing.
Of course, Ms. Hart. Now, you also said that you were on a walk from the hour 11:30 to 12:30, right?
Well, not exactly, no. I didn't leave my apartment until well after 11:30. I checked my emails and I changed clothes, so really 11:34.
Well, regardless, you would say that nobody else saw you on that walk?
No, it was just a walk around the apartment complex, but Hayden knows that I do that every now and then when I need to get a breath fresh air.
But Hayden Russell didn't see you on this walk, right?
No, it was just me on the walk, but it's a normal thing for me.
So not a single person that could confirm that you were actually on that walk that day?
Objection, Your Honor, speculation. Opposing counsel is asking the witness about the knowledge of others, which calls on her to speculate inside others' minds. Therefore, that testimony is inadmissible.
I believe the testimony is admissible.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may answer the question.
Yes, well, no one can verify what I was doing on the walk, but Hayden knew that I was going on a walk, and like I said, it's pretty normal for me.
Of course. Now, you also said that you have a gun in your apartment.
We do keep the gun in the kitchen drawer just in case.
So you would have to admit that you do have access to a gun.
If I wanted to have access to the gun, but I've never had a reason to want to shoot anyone or even use a gun.
That's right. Now, finally, you heard Miss Leone testify today.
I did, yes.
And you heard her say that she was robbed.
I did hear Miss Leone say that, but the other eyewitnesses did not.
Well, you also heard that Miss Leone was threatened.
Miss Leone did say that, but again, the other eyewitnesses never did.
Miss Hart, you heard that she had a gun pointed at her. Isn't that right?
Miss Leone did testify that, but nobody else saw them.
Well, Miss Hart, regardless, you would still have to say that you are not sorry Miss Leone got robbed. Isn't that right?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevancy under Rule 401. For testimony to be relevant, it must be of consequence. And testimony and events that happened after the robbery are irrelevant. Opposing counsel is asking the witness about her opinion on the robbery after it had happened.
Well, it goes to state of mind before. I'm allowed to.
Yes, Your Honor.
Well, sure, but I'm super glad she's okay.
And you would even say that people like that deserve what's coming to them. Correct?
Maybe, but I'm really glad that Miss Leone's okay today.
Miss Hart, you would say that people like that deserve what's coming to them.
correct?
Like I said, maybe, but I'm glad she's okay.
Miss Hart, those are your words, correct?
Yes, but not about Miss Leon. I'm glad she's okay.
Miss Hart, this statement was directed about Miss Leon. Isn't that right?
It was, but today, I'm glad she's okay.
Thank you, Miss Hart. Your Honor, no further questions.
Rick?
Yes, Your Honor, very briefly. Ms. Hart, on cross-examination, you were being asked about your statement, bad things happening in shady deals. I'd like to give you an opportunity to explain it. When you said that, was it a threat?
No, it was not a threat. I was looking out for my dealer, Miss Leon.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down, thank you. And you may be excused.
With that, Your Honor, the defense rests.
And I believe we take a 5-minute break prior to the closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor, generally the defense is ready to proceed with the full life.
Is that all right with
Yes, Your Honor.
everybody? Okay. All right. And I believe in mock trial that the Commonwealth goes first. Who goes first? Commonwealth?
The Commonwealth, Your Honor.
Okay. And you wish to go ahead and proceed? You wish to go ahead and proceed with your closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. You may proceed.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Now it's nearing the end of February and Blake Hart is getting frustrated. After buying marijuana from Kennedy Leon for months, she realizes that she isn't getting what she paid for. The next time the two meet, Miss Hart is shorted again and she confronts Miss Leon. She yells that Miss Leon is ripping her off. She claims that she is owed more than what she got, and as she turns to leave, she shouts an ominous threat. Bad things happen to shady dealers. Now it is at this moment that Blake Hart hatches a plan. The next time she meets up with Kennedy Leon, she doesn't bring money, she brings a gun. She points that gun at Miss Leon, demands everything in her pockets, takes what she believes is owed. Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Now, as my co-counsel Lucy Tolliver explained at the beginning of today's trial, we hold the burden of proof. We have to prove to you that Blake Hart is guilty of armed robbery beyond a reasonable doubt. Members of the jury, we have met this burden. Now let's go through how exactly we did that. Now first, you learned at around 11:30 on March 14th, Miss Kennedy Leon received a text message from Badger, the name she had assigned to Blake Hart. Now, you've heard the name Badger come up quite a bit today. And the defense tried to convince you that multiple people knew of that name, but members of the jury, that simply isn't the case. We brought Miss Leon up to the stand and she told you exactly what happened. Well, multiple people have contacted her as Badger. They were clearly not Blake Hart. And now, Blake Hart came to the stand and said that they gave out that name to multiple people, but when we asked her about it, she couldn't give you a name. Because members of the jury, they don't exist. In fact, the only person Miss Leon had ever decided to meet up with in LaRue Park is Blake Hart. And that's precisely what happened on March 14th. And you also learned on March 14th around noon, Blake Hart arranged to purchase an ounce of marijuana from Kennedy Leon. And there were 2 eyewitnesses to this transaction. Now, the defense called Sawyer Scott to the stand, and he told you that he didn't see a robbery take place. And members of the jury, we agree. Sawyer Scott didn't see a robbery take place because he left before it could happen. But there was one eyewitness who stayed. Miss Rory Butler. Miss Butler told you exactly what she saw Blake Hart wearing, a bulky black coat with a hoodie sweatshirt with a hole in the abdomen area. Now, Officer Grant told you that she found not only the hoodie, but also the bulky black coat in Blake Hart's apartment,
along with exactly $500 and an ounce of marijuana, precisely what Ms. Leon had described being stolen from her. Now, Hayden Russell came to the stand, and he told you that that marijuana was theirs. But members of the jury, that doesn't add up. Hayden Russell had never touched drugs in his life, whereas Blake Hart had used drugs consistently since high school. Are we really supposed to believe that suddenly changed on the day of the robbery? No. That doesn't make any sense. Now, today you heard Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. And that's why we ask at the end of today's trial that you find Blake Hart guilty of armed robbery. Thank you.
Thank you. The defense,
Yes, Your Honor.
you may address the jury.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, and members of the jury, there was not enough time. Blake Hart did not commit this robbery, and Blake Hart could not commit this robbery for one simple reason. There was not enough time. Today we have put forth a timeline defense showing how there was not enough time for Blake Hart to get from her apartment to the LaRue Park to rob Kennedy Leon. And we did this by using the Commonwealth's own evidence. Officer Dakota Grant did the measurements. On a busy day with traffic on the streets, it takes more than 30 minutes. The first piece of evidence you saw today were these time-stamped text messages between drug dealer Kennedy Leon and Badger where they set up their meeting. The last text was sent at 11:30. But Blake lives more than 30 minutes away. So what does this mean? It means that if Blake sent this last text at 11:30 and left her apartment immediately, she wouldn't arrive at the park until after 12 and certainly not before 12. Yet Kennedy testified that both she and Badger arrived before 12. From text message to robbery, it takes less than 30 minutes, but from Blake's apartment to the scene of the robbery, it takes more than 30 minutes. And that is why I say there is not enough time. Members of the jury, this person in the hoodie was a completely different person. We called 3 witnesses to testify today, starting with eyewitness Sawyer Scott. Now, Mr. Scott was around town and in the park that day. He testified about the activity and how busy things were. This means that Officer Grant's 30-minute measurement would have been actually much longer. Next, you heard from Blake's roommate, Hayden Russell. Hayden Russell explained how he was with Blake that day and how Blake did not have enough time to get to the park by noon. And finally, you heard from the defendant herself, Blake Hart. Ms. Hart testified how she was at her apartment complex at the time and how she did not have enough time to get from her apartment all the way across town in this 30-minute increment to commit a robbery against somebody that she already knew. And remember, Badger arrived faster than 30 minutes. Badger is a different person, and that is reasonable doubt. We saw other evidence today that Badger was a different person. The Commonwealth's own witness, Rory Butler, testified that Badger was wearing a cream-colored zip-up hoodie. This is a photograph of the hoodie found in Blake Hart's apartment. It is dark gray, not cream-colored. In fact, it's up against a cream-colored carpet, and I think we could all agree that this is the opposite color, and that is reasonable doubt. Another area of reasonable doubt, how about the 10 plus other people using the codename Badger? You watched my co-counsel, Mr. Fagenbush, and Blake Hart count out how many other Badgers there were, and ladies and gentlemen, they ran out of fingers. There's that many, and Kennedy admitted that she never knew who was contacting her with the codename. In fact, she handed out the Badger codename almost as much as she handed out drugs. Not enough time. The cream-colored hoodie, the half a dozen other people using the codename Badger. Just one of these means you cannot convict today. And that's because the Commonwealth has the burden of proof to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that Blake Hart committed this robbery. But ladies and gentlemen, they have failed to do that. The prosecution tried to paint this picture that Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. But that's simply not true. We showed you that the prosecution didn't get the evidence they wanted, so they rushed an investigation. They didn't interview an eyewitness. They used an unmeasured bag of marijuana that somebody claimed and served time for, and they're using a hoodie that contradicts their own eyewitness testimony. And yet they expect you to come to a guilty verdict based on this unreliable witness. And ladies and gentlemen, that is not what we do in the court of law. I urge you to remember the facts that we have provided you that are reasonable doubt. There was not enough time. There was a cream-colored hoodie, and there were 10 plus other people using the Badger code name. Just one of these puts an end to this trial today and makes your decision easy. Just one. And because of that, we ask that you find Blake Hart not guilty of robbery in the first degree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I believe that concludes the case. I will say that the court has made the grievous error by not reading the instructions before the closing arguments. But I think we're too far gone to correct that. At this time, the jury will...
How about this rebuttal?
Oh, you saved some time for rebuttal.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please.
May I ask how much time we have left?
Your Honor, Commonwealth has a minute and 5 seconds time remaining for rebuttal.
Yes. Members of the jury, the defense just came before you and said, not enough time, a cream-colored hoodie, and multiple Badgers. Now let's go through each of these things. Not enough time. Now they told you that there's a time discrepancy, that it would have taken 23 minutes versus 30 minutes. Now members of the jury, that's 7 minutes. And that is not enough time to allow Miss Hart to go free. Members of the jury, if she had hopped, if she had skipped, if she had run, she could have made that time easily. Now a cream-colored hoodie. Miss Butler came before you today and she made it very clear that she did not know what color she saw, but that she had to give a cream-colored hoodie. And finally, multiple Badgers. Miss Leone told you today that when multiple people had contact to her as Badgers, they were clearly not Blake Hart. Members of the jury, Blake Hart didn't get what she paid for, so she took it. Find Blake Hart guilty of armed robbery. Thank you.
That concludes the case, and the jury will return to the jury room and deliberate, come back with their verdict. If everyone would please stand for the jury. I can't tell you how many times the attorney stood up and said, could I address that just briefly, Judge? Half an hour later, he's still. Probably take a lot more comments, but
Judge, I think we're about ready. I'm going to do the announcements for top attorney and top witness here in a second. Do you have the verdict form?
do I?
Do you have the verdict form with the jury instructions? Yes. I do not know that. I'm going to let them put that in and bring it in. And then after that, I'll tell you that we're ready for verdict. Okay, no, it needs to go through. I don't want to know that. I'm not going to know in advance. We'll just do all right. Well, it's been a long turn in everyone. Appreciate everyone participating. My name is Will Mattingly. Many of you already know, but if you don't know already, I'm the one who wrote the case. Very good to see everyone here and giving light, especially to the witnesses. Whenever I announce the top attorneys and top witnesses, you've got an announcement of next year's case during closing ceremonies. The top attorneys and top witnesses, if you wish, afterwards, will have a cameo in next year's case. So, top attorney.
is, you want me to say the member of ranks or just the name?
Let's go France.
Okay. With rank of 24, on the defense, Shana Garrett. And for the top witness, with a rank of 16, also on the defense, Bryce Charles. Here's how we're going to announce the winner. I'm going to be acting as a foreperson. The judge is going to be asking if the jury's reached a verdict, and then I'm going to hand it to the judge.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. And if the prosecution has won the final tournament, the verdict will be guilty. If the defense has won, it will be not guilty. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes. No, I haven't heard of it. We, the defendant, find the defendant not guilty.
They get the gavel trophy and the traveling trophy. Congratulations. Congratulations.